The skies over Earth split open, a vast blackness tearing through the atmosphere. An immense fleet of alien ships descended, their silhouette casting an ominous shadow over the planet. The world watched in stunned silence as the alien prince, Vorith of the Zyanther Empire, spoke across every global broadcast channel. Humanity, you have been given ample time to surrender. Your fate is sealed. Know this, your resistance will only make your extinction that much more painful. The prince's voice reverberated in every language, each syllable dripping with disdain. His fleet hovered like a swarm of locusts above major cities, their weapons powered, primed to unleash destruction. His words were not a threat. They were a declaration, one meant to break the spirit of an entire species. Across Earth, millions stood frozen, eyes locked on screens, as the most advanced military forces humanity had ever known began their assault. The Zyanther Empire, with technology eons beyond anything humanity had created, moved in with relentless precision. They had conquered galaxies. Earth was nothing more than a trifling stop along their path to domination. General Alyssa Kane, leader of Earth's unified defense forces, sat in the heart of the command center, staring at the display. The map of the world was covered in red, each blinking light marking an alien ship descending into Earth's atmosphere. Her fingers trembled as she tapped a command into the interface, pulling up real-time data on the approaching fleet. It didn't matter. She already knew the numbers. The enemy had the advantage in every way that mattered. You've seen the reports, Alyssa, her second-in-command, Lieutenant Elias Hayes, said quietly, his voice betraying none of the fear that lingered just below the surface. The prince's forces are far beyond anything we've ever faced. How do we fight this? She looked at the map, at the tiny symbols of humanity's defense positions scattered, fragile points on a map dwarfed by the looming alien fleet. Her mind raced, searching for any sliver of hope. Do we have any chance? Elias asked again, his voice louder now, filled with disbelief. He was a seasoned officer, but no amount of training prepared anyone for this level of disparity. Alyssa turned her gaze to the massive projection of Vorith's fleet. The Zyanther ships were sleek, towering vessels brimming with power, energy shields, devastating weapons, the ability to obliterate cities with a mere thought. And in the center of it all, Prince Vorith himself, a leader born from the privilege of centuries-old empires, raised to believe in the superiority of his people, of his bloodline. To him, humanity was little more than an obstacle, a brief annoyance, an ant that could be crushed beneath his boot. The prince's message flashed again across the screen. Flee or be annihilated. Alyssa clenched her fists. She had trained her entire life for this moment, and yet all the simulations, all the strategies they had developed, seemed inadequate in the face of such an overwhelming force. General Kane, a voice crackled through the comms. It was Captain Rivera, stationed in the Pacific sector. We've spotted some kind of weakness in their formation. It's not much, but there's an opening in their defense. Maybe we can... Alyssa cut him off with a sharp gesture. There's no opening, she said, her voice colder than she intended. They're just toying with us. The prince's forces continued their descent, dropping through Earth's atmosphere with the calculated calm of a hunter. Every human on Earth was held in the grip of impending doom, paralyzed by the reality that they were utterly outclassed. Alyssa's mind shifted focus. She had a duty, not just to her people, but to the soldiers under her command. If humanity had any hope of surviving, it would take more than just military might. It would take ingenuity. It would take something the prince hadn't anticipated, something that would force him to realize that humanity was not just some plaything to be destroyed. Call every scientist, every engineer we have, Alyssa ordered, her voice firm. We need to find a way to fight back or we're done. And if we can't win, we'll at least make them pay for every inch they take. Behind her, the roar of alien ships reverberated in the sky. The prince had underestimated humanity. And soon, he would learn just how costly that mistake would be. Amid the chaos of the invasion, the world had gone into survival mode. Governments collapsed, communication networks sputtered, and cities were abandoned as the alien fleet hovered ominously overhead. People ran, hid, and fought, but the overwhelming might of the Zyanther Empire crushed every effort. The stories of humanity's defiance were becoming whispered legends, but no one believed they could truly stand against such power. Except for one man. Ethan Rook wasn't a soldier, nor a government official. He wasn't even particularly remarkable by most standards. A former software engineer, now turned survivalist, Ethan had spent years quietly building a life off the grid, far from the chaos of modern civilization. When the alien fleet arrived, he didn't panic. He watched. He analyzed. His home, a small cabin nestled in the mountains, was equipped with an array of tech, most of it outdated by Earth standards, but perfectly functional. Satellite feeds, old radios, and repurposed military-grade equipment. Ethan had always been a tinkerer, and his deep knowledge of systems, combined with his penchant for outsmarting technology, gave him an edge. He'd known humanity's vulnerabilities, and he had always wondered how long it would be before someone else took advantage of them. He never thought that someone would be him, though. That morning, as the first wave of Zyanther forces began their assault, Ethan's cabin was nothing more than a quiet refuge from the madness. His monitors blinked, displaying maps and real-time reports from around the world. Most of the cities had fallen. The few pockets of resistance were barely holding on. But then a peculiar signal caught his attention, an alien scout drone, moving silently just beyond the tree line. It hadn't spotted him yet. Ethan's heart raced, not from fear, but from exhilaration. This was his moment. While the rest of the world cowered in terror, he had an opportunity. The drone was using a standard communication protocol, but he could see the subtle irregularities in the transmission, like a signature, a tell that he could exploit. He quickly tapped into the drone's frequency, bypassing its encryption with ease. It was child's play to him. Within moments, he'd gained access to the drone's navigation system. He fed it false data, creating a new set of coordinates that would lead it miles off course, deep into the heart of the mountain range. The drone, following its new instructions, disappeared into the distance, leaving Ethan to smile at his small victory. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Ethan's mind worked in overdrive as he thought through the possibilities. If he could outsmart a single drone, what could he do to the larger enemy forces? Humanity was outmatched in brute strength, but they had something the aliens didn't: adaptability. He had witnessed enough of the alien technology from the broadcast feeds to see the patterns, their reliance on predictability, their overconfidence. They assumed humanity was beneath them, incapable of understanding their advanced systems. It was a fatal error. Ethan spent the next few hours refining his plan, gathering what he could. He hacked into a nearby satellite, using it to get a broader view of the alien formations. They were everywhere, hovering above major cities, positioning themselves for ground invasion. But they were unaware of the deep flaws in their systems. The more he studied, the more he found weaknesses buried deep within their tech, hidden behind layers of security he was already prepared to breach. By nightfall, Ethan had contacted a few scattered resistance groups using his encrypted channels. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. There was no time for that. Instead, he explained what he had found: vulnerabilities in the enemy's command systems, cracks in the armor they wore so proudly. They couldn't win through sheer force, but they could win through precision and surprise. He had a plan, one that could strike at the heart of the invasion if they were bold enough to follow his lead. "Do you know what we're up against?" a gruff voice on the other end of the line asked. "I know exactly what we're up against," Ethan replied. "And I know exactly how we can take them down." For the first time since the invasion began, Ethan felt the surge of hope, sharp and clear. Humanity wasn't finished. The aliens had laughed at them, ridiculed their strength, and underestimated their resolve. They might have the upper hand, but they hadn't reckoned with a single human who was willing to fight back, not with weapons, but with wit. And now, the fight had truly begun. The days following Ethan's first successful strike against the alien scouts were a blur of activity. The world had descended into chaos, and humanity's defenses were buckling under the overwhelming force of the Xanther Empire. But amidst the devastation, something unexpected was happening. Whispers of a man who had outwitted an alien drone, of a human who had found a way to exploit their technological vulnerabilities, began to spread. Resistance groups, scattered across the globe and facing annihilation, began to rally around the possibility of a counterattack. Ethan was no longer a solitary figure hiding in the mountains. He had become the unlikeliest of leaders, guiding a growing number of fighters and strategists who had heard his message and believed in his plan. The first critical step in his strategy was to disrupt the alien command systems by targeting the core of their communications network, an enormous, floating flagship hovering just above Earth's surface. It was Voritha's personal vessel, a ship designed not only to lead his armies, but to dominate any resistance by controlling every aspect of the invasion. Ethan, working from a secure location deep in the wilderness, continued to monitor the alien fleet, feeding data to resistance commanders who had begun to mobilize. Their forces were ragtag, survivalists, former military personnel, engineers, and scientists. But they had one thing the aliens never anticipated: an ability to improvise. "I've mapped their satellite network," Ethan said to General Alyssa Kane over a secured line, his voice steady despite the tension. "We have a 3-hour window where their flagship will be out of communication range. During that time, we can access their systems." General Kane had been skeptical at first. She had seen too many well-meaning plans collapse in the face of overwhelming enemy force. But after watching the Xanther forces falter and regroup in the wake of Ethan's interference, she had begun to listen more closely. "You're sure?" she asked, her voice more cautious than ever. "I'm sure. Their system has a flaw, a feedback loop in their command protocols. I've already run simulations." Ethan paused, his fingers flying over the console as he double-checked the data. "If we inject a signal into their communications relay during that window, we can create a breach. I can take control of their navigation and defense systems long enough for us to disable their weapons." Kane hesitated, her mind working through the logistics. The plan sounded risky, but the alternative was complete obliteration. "How do you plan to get close enough to their flagship?" "I've got that covered," Ethan replied, with more confidence than he felt. "I've hacked into the tracking systems of their smaller ships. We'll send in a squadron under the radar, using their own communication systems to mask our movements. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late." General Kane let out a long breath. "All right, I'll give you what resources I can. But if this goes wrong—" "It won't," Ethan interrupted. "We're not fighting them on their terms. We're playing the long game." The plan was set into motion. As night fell, Ethan's instructions were followed by dozens of human resistance fighters. Small, agile ships, outfitted with repurposed alien technology, made their way toward the Xanther flagship. They moved like shadows, slipping past the vast alien vessels that loomed overhead. The world was holding its breath, and Ethan couldn't afford to let even a fraction of doubt slip through. This was their one shot. His team was in position, and as the clock ticked down, Ethan prepared the final phase. A single signal, a surge of encrypted data, would be sent through the alien flagship's communication systems, overriding their security protocols. Once it was done, the ship would be vulnerable to hacking, and the resistance would have control of its defense systems. The tension was palpable as Ethan's eyes flicked between monitors, his mind running over calculations again and again. The flagship loomed larger on his screen, each passing second feeling like an eternity. Then the moment arrived. Ethan initiated the sequence. A blinding flash of data surged through the satellite network, cracking open the alien flagship's defensive layers like a ship's hull struck by a devastating blow. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then, an explosion of light filled the screen. The Resistance fighters had successfully disabled the alien flagship's primary weapons. The ship began to fall from the sky, its systems crashing one by one as Ethan's virus spread through their network. The rest of the fleet scrambled in disarray, unable to regroup in time. The Resistance had done the unthinkable. They had struck a blow against the seemingly unstoppable alien empire. General Kane's voice crackled over the line. "Ethan, you did it." For a moment, there was no response. Ethan was too busy processing what had just happened. They'd gained the upper hand, but it was only a small victory in a much larger war. "You know this isn't over, right?" Ethan said, his voice grim. "The prince won't take this lightly. He'll have no choice but to deal with us," Kane replied, her tone resolute. The battle had only just begun, but humanity was no longer the underdog. Ethan had made them a force to be reckoned with, and the Xanther Prince would soon learn that even the most advanced empire could be outsmarted. The momentum from the victory over the alien flagship was brief but exhilarating. Resistance forces across the globe were emboldened, their hope renewed. News of the attack spread quickly, with the world's population watching in disbelief as reports of the Xanther Empire's first major defeat hit the airwaves. General Alyssa Kane's message was clear. Humanity had struck back, and they would not go quietly into the night. But as the initial wave of euphoria passed, the gravity of the situation set in. The Xanther Prince, Vorith, was not a leader to be taken lightly. He had watched humanity's reaction to the attack on his flagship with a mixture of fury and bemusement. His forces, though shaken, were far from defeated. In fact, they were now moving with a renewed sense of purpose, more determined than ever to crush the human resistance with overwhelming force. For Ethan, the victory felt hollow. His team had pulled off a brilliant hack, but it had come at a cost. The Xanther Empire wasn't the kind of force to give up after one setback. Their reaction to the breach in their flagship's defenses had been swift. Vorith had ordered a full-scale retaliation, sending his elite forces to Earth's remaining strongholds with orders to annihilate any human resistance. It was no longer just about taking down an alien ship. It was about surviving the coming onslaught. Ethan stared at the map displayed before him, the lines of human defense positions fading with every hour as the Xanther army closed in. His plan had given them a brief advantage, but it had only bought them time. Time to plan their next move. Time to prepare for what was coming. He turned to the makeshift command center, a haphazard collection of human engineers, military tacticians, and cyber specialists. They were working around the clock, desperate to find a way to counteract the aliens' terrifying firepower. But even with their best minds focused on the problem, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were losing ground. The Xanther had the numbers. They had the technology, but they were still blind to the one thing that had given humanity its edge: ingenuity. "We need to hit them where it hurts," Ethan said, pacing in front of the team. His voice was steady, though beneath the calm exterior, his mind was racing. The flagship may have been a victory, but it was only one ship. Vorith's forces are still coming, and they're bringing everything they've got. General Kane's voice crackled through the intercom. "Ethan, I need your eyes on something. A new report just came in from the Eastern Front. We've intercepted communication from their scout ships. It's not good." Ethan immediately patched into the encrypted feed, watching as the data unfolded. The Xanther scouts had gathered an enormous amount of intel, pinpointing the exact locations of the last remaining human strongholds. But it wasn't just the coordinates that worried him. It was the alien military tactics. They had adapted. They were no longer just attacking with brute force. Now they were coordinating, setting traps, and anticipating human movements with eerie precision. "They're learning," Ethan muttered, eyes narrowing. "Vorith is smarter than I thought." "Are you saying we can't win?" Kane asked, a flicker of concern in her voice. Ethan didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared at the alien data, analyzing the patterns. The Zyanther weren't invincible. They were arrogant. They believed their superior technology and overwhelming numbers were enough to crush any resistance. But in their arrogance, they had overlooked something critical. Vortha's forces are built around their high-tech weaponry, Ethan said finally, his mind locking into place. But if we can cut them off from their supply lines, disrupt their ability to get reinforcements and ammunition, then we have a fighting chance. Kane was silent for a moment, digesting his words. Are you suggesting we sabotage their supply chains? It's our only shot, Ethan replied. We find their supply hubs, their transport routes, and we hit them with everything we've got. If we take out their logistics, we take out their ability to sustain their war effort. Without their resources, their machines, their weapons, they'll be forced to retreat. Kane's voice grew resolute. It's risky, but I agree. We'll coordinate with the remaining forces and hit them hard. The plan was set into motion with grim determination. As the resistance forces mobilized to target the Zyanther supply lines, Ethan worked tirelessly to refine his tactics. He knew that this mission would be their last chance to regain any semblance of control. The Zyanther might be technologically superior, but they weren't prepared for guerrilla warfare on a global scale. They underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to fight in ways their advanced systems couldn't predict. The first strike came under the cover of darkness, a coordinated series of attacks targeting the Zyanther's transport vessels and supply depots. Ethan had designed a series of electromagnetic pulses to cripple their networks, causing mass disruptions across the alien forces. For a brief moment, it looked as though they had pulled it off. Then, without warning, the Zyanther retaliated. The ground shook as explosions rang out, signaling the beginning of the largest counteroffensive humanity had ever faced. Vorth was no longer playing games. He had learned from his mistake. He would destroy the human resistance, no matter the cost. As Ethan watched the alien forces rally for the final assault, he knew one thing with certainty. The coming days would determine humanity's survival. This wasn't just a war for Earth's future. It was a war for the very soul of humanity. The alien counteroffensive came like a storm, relentless and unyielding. The first wave of attacks came so fast, so precisely coordinated, that resistance forces were barely able to react. Every city was hit. Every stronghold was breached. The Zyanther had adapted. Their machines had become more responsive, more intuitive, as if the alien army had anticipated every move humanity could make. They were learning at a rate that far outpaced anything humans could manage. And with each passing hour, it seemed as if the Zyanther were getting closer to their goal, complete annihilation of Earth's last defenses. Ethan Rook watched the incoming data with grim focus. He had spent days preparing for the worst, but even his own strategic mind could not have predicted just how efficiently the aliens had recalibrated their tactics. Their ships now moved in perfect formation, cutting off escape routes, decimating the last pockets of resistance with devastating precision. Human forces were overwhelmed, scattered, barely hanging on. We've lost contact with Eastern Europe, General Kane's voice crackled through the secure comms. The last of our forces there have been wiped out. We need a new plan. Fast. Ethan's fingers flew across the terminal, his mind working through dozens of scenarios in a matter of seconds. He'd known that a direct confrontation with the full force of the Zyanther fleet would be disastrous. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. But one thing became painfully clear. Earth was not going to win this war through traditional tactics. The alien technology was simply too advanced, and their numbers were overwhelming. Yet, as impossible as it seemed, Ethan wasn't ready to give up. There's a way to fight back, he said, his voice firm but tinged with urgency. It's going to require more than just military force, though. We have to turn the tables, use their own strategy against them. A moment of silence followed his words. Then General Kane's voice came back, tight with disbelief. How? We need to go after the heart of their empire, Ethan explained, his fingers hesitating over the keys as he laid out the plan. Not just their weapons or ships. We need to cripple their leadership. Prince Vorith has been relying on a central command system to coordinate the entire invasion. If we can hack into it and send a false signal, we can cripple their ability to communicate across the fleet. We could create confusion, make them think they're under attack from their own forces. You want us to attack their command center? How? Not attack, distract, Ethan corrected. The Zyanther are used to dominating from a distance, coordinating with their machines. But their leader, Vorith, is still human in one respect. He craves control. If we can make him believe his control is slipping, he'll make a mistake. And when he does, we'll exploit it. General Kane paused, as if weighing the possibility of what Ethan suggested. I'll give you what resources I can, Ethan. But this isn't going to be easy. We'll be putting everything on the line. Ethan nodded, though she couldn't see him. I know. But it's the only way. The plan was set into motion quickly. Resistance fighters began their final preparations, moving covertly across the globe to infiltrate key Zyanther facilities. Meanwhile, Ethan worked in the shadows, pulling strings behind the scenes to ensure that the distractions he created were timed perfectly. Every piece of alien technology he had hacked, every trap he had set, now came to a head. For a moment, as the resistance forces prepared for the operation, there was a sense of stillness, a quiet before the storm. Ethan knew it was only a matter of time before the Zyanther would discover their efforts. But what they didn't realize was that they were walking directly into the trap he had so carefully laid. The operation began at dawn. Coordinated strikes across multiple continents created enough of a diversion to draw the attention of Vorith's elite forces. While his army scrambled to protect their infrastructure, Ethan's team, hidden in plain sight, blending in with the alien communications network, sent a massive burst of false data. The message was simple: betrayal within the ranks. The impact was instantaneous. Across the alien fleet, commanders began to question their orders. Trust, which had always been the cornerstone of the Zyanther Empire, faltered. Machines malfunctioned. Weapon systems turned on their own crews, and entire divisions fell into disarray. Prince Vorith's command structure was cracked open like a fragile egg. Vorith's response was immediate. The alien prince, furious at the breach, ordered a full investigation. But the damage had been done. The moment of confusion was enough for the resistance to move in, launching an all-out assault on the critical command center located on the outskirts of the alien fleet's central hub. The fighting was brutal. Ethan, leading a small group of specialized operatives, infiltrated the heart of the alien stronghold. The corridors of the command center were silent, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. But even as they moved deeper into the heart of the Zyanther operations, Ethan could feel the weight of what was coming. He had given humanity its chance, but whether or not they could survive the final strike was another matter. Then, a voice crackled through his earpiece. General Kane, her voice tight with tension. Ethan, we've done it. Vorith's lost control. His fleet is in disarray. It's all yours now. Ethan didn't respond. He was already moving, his mind focused entirely on the task at hand. He had come too far to fail now. Prince Vorith had underestimated humanity, and he was about to learn just how costly that mistake would be. The final assault on the Zyanther command center was everything Ethan had hoped for, and more. The resistance forces had struck hard, exploiting the cracks in the Zyanther's once impenetrable defenses, and now the tide of the war had shifted. Prince Vorith, who had once mocked humanity for its primitive ways, was now facing the very real consequences of underestimating the resilience and resourcefulness of Earth's defenders. But even as Ethan moved through the corridors of the alien stronghold, his every step measured, his mind couldn't help but race. The Zyanther were a vast empire. Their technology was unfathomably advanced. Victory had never been so close, yet it felt so fragile. He had given humanity a chance, a sliver of hope that they might survive, but it all hinged on one thing: capturing Vorith. The Zayanther Prince was more than just a leader. He was the symbol of their empire's superiority. Remove him, and the entire structure would begin to crumble. But capturing him wouldn't be easy. Vorith was no fool. He'd been forced into hiding, surrounded by his elite guards. The command center was a vast, cold, and sterile facility, its walls lined with high-tech screens and interfaces that hummed with alien energy. There were no sounds of war here, no explosions, no cries of soldiers. It was an eerie silence, punctuated only by the rapid pace of Ethan's footsteps and the occasional low hum of the alien systems. He was deep in enemy territory, and the risk of detection was high. His team, a small group of the best operatives humanity had left, moved in perfect synchrony, cutting through the Zayanther defenses with precision. It wasn't just technology that had won them this moment. It was their adaptability, their willingness to fight against insurmountable odds. Humanity had become the predator in this fight, and the Zayanther were learning that too late. Ethan's earpiece crackled. "We're in position, Ethan. The command center's systems are ours. We're ready for the final phase." General Kane's voice came through, calm but laced with tension. "Understood," Ethan replied, his voice a low whisper. "Don't give them a chance to regroup. We've got one shot at this." He rounded a corner and froze. Ahead of him, the doors to the central chamber were guarded. The alien guards, imposing in their sleek armor, stood alert, unaware of the approaching humans. Ethan's team moved with silent precision, taking them out in a series of fluid motions. The guards never had a chance. Inside the chamber, Vorith waited, a figure shrouded in shadow, his regal appearance undisturbed by the chaos outside. He didn't look like a man ready to fight for his life. Instead, he looked almost calm, too calm, as if he believed his enemies would never reach him. But the moment his eyes met Ethan's, something changed. The Zayanther Prince stood slowly, his face a mask of stoic arrogance. "You," he said, his voice cold but filled with contempt. "The human who thinks he can challenge an empire." Ethan didn't flinch. "I'm not here to challenge your empire. I'm here to end it." The prince's lips curled into a smile, one that carried no warmth. "You think you won? This is just a momentary distraction. My empire is vast. You can take my ship, but you cannot destroy what I've built. I am the future of the Zayanther. You can't stop us." Vorith was wrong. Ethan knew it. Humanity was nothing if not relentless, and they had learned to adapt, to survive against overwhelming odds. The Zayanther Empire might have been vast, but it was built on arrogance and isolation. They had underestimated Earth, and now they would pay for that mistake. "Your empire will fall," Ethan said firmly, stepping closer. "Because you've forgotten something. You've forgotten the power of humanity's will." The Zayanther Prince's eyes flickered with the first hint of doubt, but it was too late. Ethan had already initiated the final sequence, sending a surge of data into the command center's central system. The screens around them flickered, and the lights above them began to dim. "No!" Vorith shouted, his voice laced with panic. "You don't know what you've done. You've unleashed." But it was already too late. The systems began to overload. The prince's command center was collapsing in on itself, the technological infrastructure that had once supported his empire now turning against him. Ethan had sabotaged the core systems, severing the prince's link to his forces, severing the one thing that had allowed him to maintain control over the vast Zayanther fleets. Vorith's face twisted in anger and disbelief, but it was a fleeting expression. The prince realized too late that the empire he had built was not invincible. And as the systems around them began to short-circuit, Vorith's remaining power drained away. "I did warn you," Ethan said, his voice quiet but resolute. "No empire lasts forever." With a final command, the resistance forces began to move. Across the globe, human fighters launched the final assault, exploiting the chaos Ethan had created within the heart of the Xyanther fleet. Voritha's forces, disoriented and crippled, began to crumble. The Xyanther had learned the hard way that no matter how advanced their technology was, they couldn't account for one thing: humanity's ability to fight back. And now, the Xyanther prince would see just how costly that oversight had been. As Ethan stood over the defeated alien prince, he couldn't help but feel a bittersweet satisfaction. This was just the beginning. Earth had won this battle, but the war for the future had only just begun.